Hi, I'm Bridal coming to you from my backyard and from Ponderosa FFA Floral. And this is just a series of videos I'm doing for distance learning while we are in social isolation or quarantine. And hopefully so that people can consider doing some floral design, especially my students who are at home, keeping their skills up. That's one of our main goals. But if you want to learn more about design or you have little ones at home, this could be something that you could try with younger students as well. So today I'm going to show you how to make a hand-tied bouquet. It could be a bridal bouquet. It will end up for us to be a bouquet that we put in a vase, but you certainly could make a bridal bouquet or bridesmaid's bouquet this way. And this is just going to be with parallel stem placement. So it takes a little bit of practice, but it's not complicated. Certainly I think that most people will have a good time trying to put this together. So I've basically prepped my materials. The things that you would need would be a vase. And the vase that I have it's this nice hobnail vase, and it has an opening about the size of a large canning jar. And I have about 20 stems of flowers here, about 10 stems of some kind of greenery. And so that's a good size for that amount of flowers. You need either some raffia or ribbon or some kind of tape. We have bowl tape or stem wrap or bind wire or some kind of twist tie for when your bouquet is done and you want to go ahead and keep it in place. And then you need a pair of pruners. So I've mostly prepped my materials, but I'm just going to talk to you a little bit and finish doing that. What I'm doing, like with my leather leaf, is I'm pulling off the bottom leaves because wherever my hand is, we are going to use that like as our guide of where the bride would be holding the bouquet or where it will end up in our vase. And so we can't necessarily have all of these lateral pieces, these lateral branching stems coming off on the bottom there. And also if any are not looking so good, if they are bent or broken, I'm going to go ahead and take those off. And so this takes a little bit of time, laying out your materials and preparing them. And I have to say, I've said this in previous videos, this isn't the best method that I have going on here. I want you to be able to see all the materials, but putting your flowers out on a table that's full of bacteria is not necessarily the best method. Keeping them in a bucket of water as you're working is more ideal. But for learning and teaching purposes, this works well for us today. So you'll take some time to prep, and the reason is because eventually with this kind of bouquet, you'll be holding it in your hand, so you'll really only have one hand to work with. So you have to take a little bit of time to get ready. I have some grevillea here that I've already taken the lower stems off of. That's another green that's going to add some interesting texture. We have spider mums, and I've taken most of the leaves off of here. Some great florists, when I've been in workshops with them, have really emphasized taking off all these little nubs on the stems because a bride will be holding this and you want it to feel good in her hand. I'm not going to take the time to do that today, just because you may not have an hour to watch a video, but it's something to consider, is taking a nice sharp pair of pruners and clipping off all those little nubs off of the stem as you go along. With the roses, just a reminder that roses have these guard petals on the outside. Sometimes you want to leave them on if they're looking good and you like the color variation, but if they're bruised, they're damaged, they're ripped, then you want to take those off so that you are left with a beautiful rose. And then I have statice, and statice, as you may know, is a great dried flower. It'll just kind of looks the same as it starts to dry out. It lasts a very long time. I'm going to take off the bottom leaves there, and I did break these apart a bit so that I could have more pieces to put into my bouquet. So they branch, and I took those apart to get more pieces. These are pom-pom cushions, and I already took care of that one. See how this one branches so much and it has all these little flowers and buds coming out way down here? Well, that's where my hand is going to be. And so I'm going to go ahead and take off those small buds. Don't worry, you can always practice boutonnieres, corsages, make a little tiny vase. You don't have to throw those things away. They're just not going to work well in this particular design that we're doing. Now what I have left, most of these are the same height. I have a stem here without a flower, so I'm going to take that out. I'm just getting everything as prepared as I possibly can. We have Alstroemeria or Peruvian lilies, which are one of my favorite flowers because they're so long lasting. We did an experiment in class with these because when you go to buy flowers, your flowers should look very green. That means they're fresh. And so we kept getting these into class, and my students would design and then we would deliver, or our customers would pick up. And so I didn't think they were appreciating how beautiful this flower becomes, because it's one of those flowers that just looks better over time. It just opens more and more and becomes more colorful. So we put a vase of these on my desk and we neglected them. We let the vase run out of water, then we refilled the water. We didn't really recut them. We kind of abused them to see how long would they last. And they lasted in our classroom with the sun shining in on them for 18 days before we felt that they were done and we needed to throw them out. 18 days. So that's one of the reasons why we love them. So I'm going to take off some of these lower leaves. If anything is looking bad up here, you can pull that off. Just get everything prepped. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start with a focal flower in the center. Kind of helps me to remember what is the center of my bouquet. And then I'm just going to randomly place materials around that focal flower to start off. Now, if you want your bouquet to turn out really roundy-moundy when you're done, like a perfect half a basketball, then you want all of your flower heads to be the same height. I want mine to have a little more depth and interest to it. And if you're working with little kids who have smaller hands, or if you have some trouble with your hands and it's hard to hang on, grip things for a long time, you could make several small bouquets, tie them off, and then put them all together into your big bouquet. But if that's not the case, traditionally we would just be building this in our hand as I'm doing here. And I'm going to randomly select and put things together. You have to kind of work with the nature of the plants that you're using. So like these Alstroemeria are turning outward. So I could try to turn them inward if I want them to stand up straight, or I can use that natural curve that they have to them and work with their shape. You'll notice I keep turning my bouquet. We've talked about this in previous videos, that if you only look at one side when you're done, probably only one side is going to look good. So be sure you're turning it. I'm making a round design here, so the idea is that it should look good and be interesting to the viewer from every side. It's not a single-sided arrangement. So for that reason, I'm going to keep turning it. So I'm putting in some of that grevillea to get a little bit of texture. And I'm just paying attention to color. So for example, I have that one big yellow mum in the center, and then I have no other yellow. We'd like some repetition. And so at some point, I need to get something else yellow happening there, because our eye loves that repetition. Our eye wants to see either the same shape over and over again, or the same color over and over again, the same pattern. That's something the human eye really likes. So that's why you'll notice I don't have singles of anything here. And unless you're trying to do that for a specific design reason, generally you want to have some kind of repetition in your designs. It's much more pleasing to the human eye if you do that. Don't forget to put in some of your texture or your greens as you're going along. In this particular design, I'm saving all of the leather leaf for later. I'm going to collar this design when I'm finished. So you can see that what I'm doing with the stems is I'm just putting them in straight up and down. It's a parallel stem placement. It's not complicated. And if you were my student in the past, this is probably how I taught you to put bouquets together. Since then, the great thing about floral design is you can continue to learn your whole life. You can continue to improve your whole life. And so it's always changing. and I have learned some different techniques. And so the next video I'm going to do is a little more advanced, a little more challenging, and that is a spiral placement of stems. And that's why we have our flag out here today. I'm going to use that in the next video as a tool. But for this one, this is simply a gathering of materials. You'll notice that I continue to look at the top of my design as I go along. I can't just look at it from the side. That's a different perspective. And what I need to look for now is, where do I have holes? So for example, this side is filled out very well right now, but I have a hole right here and I have a hole up there. And so unfortunately, I'm out of flowers. And so I can see if I can fix that by moving some of my flowers in and out. So I tend to, just because it was popular for a long time probably, I tend to kind of make a roundy moundy perfect design like that. But that's not necessarily the style at this point. We have a lot of freeform bouquets going on, organic looking bouquets, and we're making those as well. But this is a good place to start. And so when I'm not with my students, I think this is a good one to teach them. It's something that can be accomplished without a whole lot of help, hopefully. But I'm going to move things in and out a bit to try to get some depth in there. So I'm pretty happy with that. So at this point, I'm going to take my greens that I have left, in this case the leather leaf, and I'm going to collar it. And it's just what it sounds like. It's like the collar of a shirt. And so you're going to put a collar of greens all the way around, and it's kind of framing this work of art that you've made. So I'm just going to place those and overlap them, one next to the other, all the way around. If you're working at home and you don't have access to flowers at this point, then I would just encourage you to try technique. Use this as a time to overcome our need for something to look beautiful at the end, and just practice your technique. Just see, can I make all these stems parallel? Can I keep the stems clean in my hand? Can I make a roundish shape no matter what I'm using? And so if you're just foraging outside your house, even if you make an all green bouquet, because that's all you have around your house today are green things, which is wonderful. It's spring, it's beautiful. Just focus on technique, because it's kind of like sitting on the bench when you're on a sports team. One of my best coaches ever said about sitting on the bench, you always have to ask yourself, are you ready? Because your opportunity will come. And are you paying attention? And have you been working? And are you ready for when that opportunity comes? So that's kind of what we're doing here. If you don't have the perfect materials at this point in time, then can you work with what you have so that you're ready when you have those great materials? So you can see what I did with that in terms of collaring around the outside. It's a style. You might like it, you might not. You might like this type of green, you might not. I certainly could have inserted more of that green throughout to give it more of that natural random look. This is just a choice of something to do with the materials I have today. But overall, I think we made a pretty round type of bouquet, which is what we were after. Our stems are neat in my hand, and so now it's time to bind it. And so at this point, this is where you're going to choose whatever material it is that you want to use. And it's a pretty important step, because we don't want to lose what we've done here. So I'm going to use raffia this time, and I'm just going to put it under my thumb, and then I'm going to go all the way around the bouquet. Do you need me to do that again?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I just hold it under my thumb, and then I take that binding material all the way around, and I'm going to pull tight. If you don't pull it tight, you're going to lose what you've done. And when the bride picks it up, it might start to fall apart, which would not be a good day. And don't worry about hurting your flowers. If these were very delicate flowers, like spring flowers, tulips, daffodils, ranunculus, some of our hollow stemmed or soft stem flowers, we would be more concerned with how we were tying this. But in general, we're trying not to break our stems, and we're trying to keep the integrity of our design, but we don't have to worry a whole lot about hurting anything. We really need to be concerned with it staying where we wanted it to. So here I have all of these long stems. So at this point, if this were a bridal bouquet, you're going to come through and you're just going to cut straight across. Cut as straight as you possibly can. Get off any stragglers, and then you would have your bouquet ready to go. But today we are going to put this in a vase. So I'm just going to show you a couple more techniques in relation to that. To be in proportion, meaning the size of the design in relation to the size of the container, the general rule in floral design is 1.5 to 2 times the height of the container. And so the way you can measure that is to put your container on the edge of your table. You are going to put the top of your design right up against that container. Here, I'll move over here so you can see. Is this better? Mm-hmm. Okay. So here's the top of the design, the top of my container, and I'm going to mark that with my hand at the table. And then if I wanted it to be 2 times the height, I'm going to move my hand up to the top of the vase, and it's 2 times the height. Look what I did. I cut it too short for us to be 2 times the height. That's okay. In this particular vase, it actually looks better if we're at 1.5. So I would come here, here's the top of my design, the top of the vase. I'm going to mark that with my finger on the table, and then I'm going to move my fingers halfway up the vase to here. Right? That's 1.5 times the height of the container. So now I should make my cut here, and it'll be the right height. So I'm going to mark that with my hand. Now, cutting stems is like cutting hair. You cannot go backwards. So it's always better to cut it longer to start with, even if you have to try it out in your vase a couple of times. We want our stems to go all the way to the bottom of the vase because that gives us support. That's part of our mechanics that holds this all in place. And my design is a little wiggly. I have to kind of stand back and look at it. I don't really like that because it's leaning over to one side. So I'm actually going to cut it a little bit shorter so that my plant materials rest on the lip of that container. And again, there's nothing wrong with having to try this a couple of times. I'm sure if we did it 8 hours a day, we could probably do it perfectly every time. But this is where we are in our learning. So we'll do it a couple times and get it right. Okay, now I feel it's right. My stems are all the way at the bottom. It's stable. Look at that. So through delivery, it's not going to fall apart. And that's what it looks like at the top. So this is a hand-tied bouquet, either a bridal bouquet or one to end up in a vase that has a parallel stem design.